Hi everyone, I'm Joseph Khateri, realtor in the state of Virginia, and today I'm going to teach you about Section 8 investing, specifically how to pick the right location, which is probably the most crucial step and the question that I get asked about the most. And this isn't about just finding any old property, this is about finding the right property in the right location in order to maximize your returns. Now, if you're new here, welcome. I previously made a 45-minute Section 8 video, and that is doing really well, as well as getting millions of views on TikTok. And I got asked so many questions in it, so I wanted to just make an entire new series dedicated step-by-step, video by video on how to get into Section 8 investing. And also just a quick disclaimer, I'm not selling a course. I do not sell a course at all whatsoever. Everything that I've learned comes from my own experience, books, podcasts, past clientele, and good old trial and error. Oh, and one more thing, it's also your responsibility as a landlord to provide safe and adequate housing. So don't be a slumlord. Okay, so Precursor, what is the Section 8 strategy that you probably have been hearing about left and right, and the reason you clicked this video? The Section 8 investing strategy is when you buy a home that meets the 1.5% or 2% rule, you get it into good condition enough that it passes the Section 8 inspections, and then you enroll it in the Government Housing Assistance Program. The government helps place tenants into your home where the tenant pays 0 to 20% of the rent, and the government will literally direct deposit to your bank account the remainder of the rent every single month. It's a win-win. You provide affordable housing and safe housing, and in return, you get a very reliable rental income, typically higher than what the actual fair market would pay. Okay, so method one that I like to use is simply using Zillow. And yes, I know, you're gonna say,
oh my god, you're a realtor, shouldn't you be recommending crazy tools?
No, and the reason is because I have crazy tools. I have my own access to something called MLS, or in my case, Bright MLS, which is local to Northern Virginia, but that's just a thing. It's local to only Northern Virginia. Meaning, if I'm gonna be looking across the country, which I assume every single one of you are, a single MLS isn't going to be enough. You gotta use something like Zillow, which covers everything. Okay, so first thing I'm gonna tell you is the criteria for picking a good city. I'm not gonna say how to just yet, that's upcoming, but I'm going to tell you the criteria right now, which is a HUD rental rate of at least $1,200 a month for a 3-bedroom, a high amount of inventory in whatever area you picked, and scalability and long-term potential. Now let's go through each of those points. So arguably the most important factor is picking a HUD rental rate of at least $1,200. Now you may ask, why specifically $1,200 for a 3-bedroom? And it's because just in my experience doing this, $1,200 is the minimum in order for you to make a healthy profit of about 50% ROI. And the reason I say this is because typically you're not gonna really find homes under about $70,000, $75,000 at a minimum, which makes that mortgage probably like $650. Okay, cool, yeah, it makes sense, 1,200 bucks. But how do you find these cities, and how do you even find out the HUD rental rates? Well, what you can do is you can literally Google HUD, FMR, and then whatever year you're in, 2025, since that's the upcoming. And then the first link, scroll down and click this big red button right here. Then you could go ahead and go to any state. By the way, the link to this is in the description. You can go ahead and just click any state. Let's say we're going for Alabama. Let's say we're going for Dale County, Alabama. I have no idea what that is, by the way. But you can see a 3-bedroom rents for $1,088. In this scenario, I would say chances are your calculations will not work out in your favor, and you should probably look at a different city. And this is something that those online gurus don't tell you, is that this amount right here is the maximum amount that the government will pay. It is the maximum. It is not the minimum. It is not guaranteed. It is just what the upper 100% limit is as to what they will pay. And let me explain right now. So if you guys read the website, and this is all very public information, I'm surprised this isn't talked about more. If you just scroll down the page, it tells you exactly how it's calculated. And in it, you will notice that there are a few factors that you want to pay attention to. And we all love Section 8 because it pays by bedroom count instead of home price or home value or anything like that. But there are still a few more factors. For example, what is inflation rate? There are inflation calculators. You have to compare it to state minimums right here. But honestly, you can ignore most of that for now because it's just telling you how they got to that number. Now, how do you know if you will get the 1,200 bucks? Well, a lot of it depends on what you're offering as a landlord to the tenant. For example, are you offering to include a fridge, a stove, a microwave? All of those are factors that will help you get this $1,200 rent. Are you willing to pay utilities? That's a big one. Because if you don't include utilities and you say tenant has to pay them, the tenant actually receives something called a utility voucher. And they're not gonna give you the voucher if they have to pay it themselves. Now let me give you guys a real example. Here is the Cuyahoga Metropolitan Housing Authority. It's just a random housing authority. Did not pick this for any specific reason. But if you go ahead and go to the rent section, you'll see, oh wow, you can go ahead and scroll down here. A 3-bedroom is $1,720. Or you can even specify by zip code. For example, this zip code 44106 is 1956, probably a more expensive area. However, if you scroll down, there is the utility allowance chart. And every housing authority typically has this, where it literally describes in detail exactly what money goes where. For example, if your home has natural gas and you, the landlord, are paying it, that means for a 3-bedroom, that's gonna contribute $81 for a single family. And guess what? If you're not paying it, they're subtracting the $81 from the rent. Well, not subtracting, but more like you're not gonna hit the 100% limit. Instead, it's gonna be like 90, 98%, whatever. You get the point. Water and sewer. This is Cleveland, right? A 3-bed is $249. Wow, kind of expensive. If the landlord pays it, then guess what? They're gonna get that $249 voucher. And if they don't, guess what? They're not getting the voucher. A range or refrigerator, same thing here. And also, you can't overcharge for rent. So as a landlord, you can technically list it for any amount. Even though the HUD will say $1,200, you can list it for $3,000. The problem is that HUD will only pay you $1,200 or whatever they calculate. And you actually sometimes can't even legally put it at $3,000. For example, here is the calculator. So if you're saying that your tenant makes $15,000 and adjusted to 12, and you're requesting $3,000 for rent in, let's say, this zip code, whatever it is, it's a 2-bedroom, etc., and you will pay for everything. You're giving a range in a refrigerator, and guess what? It will say the requested rent is not affordable for this client. So the actual housing authority would not approve of this lease being made because you're renting for an egregious amount that the tenant would never be able to afford. So that's why I always recommend just list it for literally whatever this number is. That's what you should list it as, or list it at whatever the other houses in the area are listing it for, because now you have a whole nother thing to think about. What happens if this number is 1,188, but every other house on the block is listing for 900 for Section 8? Guess what? You're not gonna get anyone for 1,188. Chances are very, very slim of that happening, meaning you have to list it at 900, typically to fall in line with everybody else on the block. Now you're saying,
oh my God, isn't that the same as just regular renting?
No, and it's because the landlords in the area, typically, if they're accepting Section 8 vouchers, they know they can list it for higher. So everyone is in accordance. For example, maybe I'm not explaining this too well, but let's say in this area, rent for a 3-bed is $700. Section 8 landlords will typically list for as high as they can to reach this 3-bedroom amount. They'll list it for 900, 1,000, maybe even the full amounts. But that's just another factor I want you guys to think about. Just because this little number's listed doesn't mean that's what you can get out of the property. If it's a rundown piece of crap property where everyone else on the block is renting for the same price but they're beautifully renovated, then guess what? Your property is not gonna get a tenant. Now what you can do is list it for what everybody else is for Section 8, and then after a year, you can request a rent increase. Now granted, the tenant and you have to agree to this, but at this point the tenant recognizes you're a good landlord, wants to stay at the property, is already paying probably 20% or less of the rent. So typically they will simply stay as long as you've been good to them, because their share of the rent will probably not increase by much. You can request it to increase to fall in line with what Section 8's maximum allowable to be. If you initially rented it at $900 because that's what everybody else in the area was doing for Section 8, a year passes, you can request it up to this $1,188 amount. Okay, so I've talked a lot about that section. Maybe I talked too much about that, but now we're gonna get into a different aspect. How do you find the cities themselves? So I have 2 strategies that I like to do. Number 1, there are tiers of cities: A tier, B tier, C tier, D tier, F tier. A tier cities: Miami, New York, cities that immediately come to mind when you think of, wow, that's a city. Take those out. You should not even consider these cities. And the reason being, they're great locations, but simply put, they're too expensive for the average investor. So instead, you can go down to B tier cities. B tier cities are cities that you think of, you probably have maybe visited one time, but they're not A tier. We're talking Pittsburgh, Philly, Austin, where they're definitely growing. They definitely have a large population. However, these cities are not going to be under 100K. And I know a lot of you watching like to go for those homes that are under 100,000. Now, I actually don't really say you should go for homes under 100K now. What I say is they should at least fall under the 1.5% or 2% rule. Let me give you an example. So here is a $90,000 home in Cleveland, Ohio, 3 bedrooms. It's a gorgeous home and it is in Cuyahoga County, 44111. Now, this housing authority website actually says the absolute most up-to-date info, and you can sort by zip code, so I'm gonna use this instead. So this is the Cuyahoga County website, and this zip code, a 3-bed, can go for 44111. Okay, and it looks like it is just going to be $1,720 a month, which is fantastic. Guess what? That falls under the 2% rule, so I approve of it. The 2% rule states that whatever this purchase price is, $90,000, you multiply it by 2 and divide by 100. 90,000 times 2 divided by 100 means that it will rent for $1,800. If it can rent for 18, then it passes the test. Now, I like to say a 1.5 minimum. So yes, it doesn't run for exactly 18, but it definitely is about 1.9, which passes my test. I say at least 1.5%. Now, you might say,
why can't I go for under 100K homes?
You absolutely can. It's a lower down payment, lower cost to get into it, however, much more competitive. Did you know that in the US, there's only like 1,300 homes under 100K? Now, 2 years ago when this strategy, I started speaking about this strategy 2 years ago, there was a lot more, admittedly. There was probably double, triple the amount of homes under 100K, but not so much anymore. Or you can always go to a different area. For example, Baltimore County, a little bit more expensive, right? It's a B tier city. Here's a home for $150,000 in that area. It's 3 bedrooms. And guess what? A 3-bed in that area rents for $2,500. Yes, it's above 100K, but the rule still applies. $150,000 times 1.5 divided by 100, and guess what? It passes the 1.5% rule, 2250 and 2500. So you don't have to go for homes just under 100K because it will be extremely competitive. You definitely can, but it will be competitive. So now you know. A tier cities, don't look at it. B tier, you can look at it if your budget's a little bit higher. C tier cities is where you go if your budget's under 100K. But how do you find B tier and C tier cities? You can't just name them off the top of your head. You don't know something that you don't know. Well, you start Googling most populated cities and just name a state near you. It doesn't even have to be near you. Just name a state that doesn't contain an A tier city inside of it. Let's just go Alabama. And what you do is you just straight up go on Zillow and look at these top 5 cities. So I already know Huntsville is a little expensive, so let's go number 2, Birmingham. And would you look at that? Put in 3 beds, only select houses and multifamilies. And if your maximum is $100,000, there's 132 results. Now, for it to be a city that I recommend investing in, there has to be at least 80 homes when you look it up, because if it's under 80, then guess what's gonna happen? You're gonna have a tough time getting any of the homes. They're gonna be outbid every single time. 10 offers per house, it's going to be impossible. So I recommend at least 80 results. Now, what happens if you find an area you like and you're trying to see if it's under 100K or what the true budget is for that area? Let's look at Akron, Ohio, for example. If you put in 40 to 100K, 3+ bedroom, and only houses and multifamilies, you only get 69 results. Not enough. I said 80 minimum, meaning we gotta push up the budget. Let's say 150. Guess what? That's 186 results. That means the prime budget for this area is around $100,000 to $150,000. So if that's your budget, then yeah, sure, Akron's a great location. And this applies to any city that you choose. Now, let's say you don't want to do this. You don't want to do this strategy, okay? You're like,
oh my God, I don't want to do that much work. That's so annoying.
That brings us to method 2. You can use a website such as InvestorLift. Now, I found out about this only about 2 months ago. And the thing I like about this more than Zillow is that you can look at the entire country all at once. It's not like Zillow where you have to put in a specific area. You can click advanced filters, and I'm going to say the maximum budget is, let's say 200K, right there. Perfect, $200,000. And at least 2 to 5 bedrooms. Now, as you can see, there are 2,600 in the entire nation. So now we scroll in, it looks like these two areas are big hotspots, not so much on the West Coast, which seems obvious. So we're gonna go ahead and scroll in a little bit. Where is the hotspots? Okay, looks like there's one right here. What is that? What is that? That is Houston, it looks like. Houston has a lot of homes that are right under 200. So let's say I pick Houston, for example. I look at this and I say, oh my God, Houston seems nice. Well, now you just go back here and you do the exact same thing. You just go to Zillow now, Houston, Texas. It looks like for homes that are 3 beds under 150, there's 135 results. That's a pretty good amount. But what if it was 100? Okay, only 17 results. That means the prime budget for Houston is about 100,000 to 150,000. Which is again completely fine as long as it fits the 1.5 times rule. You have to think about scalability here. What happens when you want to buy your 5th house, your 10th house, your 15th house? You don't want to switch cities because that means different realtors, different contractors, different management. You want to stick in the same city until you build a sizable portfolio before changing. And that means, yeah, you guessed it, you need to pick a place that has good inventory that it's not going to be a problem buying in the future. I can't speak too much about this since I'm a realtor, I'm licensed. I can't just say,
hey, oh my God, these crime statistics make it a bad area.
I can't do that. That is a violation of my ethics as a realtor. I will lose my license. So I will say this website exists. You can look up specific zip codes, specific cities. You can look up crime rates. You can look up income. You can look up average home prices. Basically any data you'd want is in here. And a big one that I like to look at is population. Now, a shrinking population isn't necessarily a bad thing. That's what people misunderstand. What that means is that, yeah, home prices might not be appreciating far in the future. However, to avoid or get around that, you do crazy long fixed lease terms. You slap people with a 5-year lease, a 10-year lease, a 15-year lease, so that the rent amount never changes. Okay, by now you should know exactly how to pick a city. I went a lot more in depth with this than I did in my original 45-minute video. And this is a crucial step in the process. The question I get most asked about probably the most, and I just noticed my mic died. That sucks. Sorry about that. Anyways, I do not charge you guys anything. All I ask is please subscribe. Make sure you hit the bell so you know when I upload. And if you'd like to work with me buying Section 8 properties, because I am a realtor, click the link in the description. It is a Google form, fill it out, and my assistant will directly text your number. I'm being serious about that. He will collect info from you. You can ask him questions to give me. And if you'd like to talk more about Section 8 or work with me, book a consultation. I don't charge $5 like others. It's $50 just to weed out people who aren't serious about this. And as always, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video and have a great day.